DSL people join, I think.
Nice.
And we are live. So we're 6 seconds in apparently, and if we are live, it would be awesome for anybody who might be tuning in and might be watching, just to drop a little bit of a comment into the chat underneath, and just tell us if we are coming to you live on a screen near you. So we should be open for business. So I've got two awesome panelists joining me today. I've got Kane Sims from Vux World and Jimmy Hosang, who's a returning veteran of the Contact Center Network. And he's from Mojo CX, but I'm not going to introduce them because they are both more than capable of introducing themselves. So I'm going to hand over to Kane. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Vux World, Kane, and then Jimmy, we'll come to yourself. So Kane, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yourself an
Thank
intro.
you. So I'm Kane, founder of VUX World or Vux World, and we've existed now for coming up, I think, 7 years or so. We are, I suppose, I like to think of us a little bit like the front door to the kind of AI in enterprise world, whereby through our various media channels, newsletters, podcasts, webinars, conferences, things like that, we kind of bring people together to collate and disseminate best practice. And through our consultancy practice, we enact that best practice basically and help organizations design and deploy successful, award-winning, in fact, AI solutions.
Award-winning, awesome.
Award-winning, yeah.
Congratulations on the awards. Jimmy, are you an award-winning Mojo CXer?
I've got my cycling proficiency, but it was a long time ago.
There's plenty of time for that. But introduce yourself, Jimmy, and tell us a little bit about Mojo.
So I'm Jimmy Hosang. I'm the CEO and founder of Mojo CX, and we're a company that specializes in AI solutions for contact centers in three areas. One is conversational guidance and next best action. One is speech and text analytics, and the other is targeted coaching. And been working in data science in contact centers for 13 years now. I've kept saying 12 years, but it's now 13 years. And I've done a variety of roles: capacity planning, resource planning, transformation, insight, and I've even worked on the phones. So our solutions are specifically designed for contact center people by contact center people.
Love it.
Nice.
And it's really, really good to have you both, because I think we've got a really hot agenda to go through, and a topical agenda. And what I've tried to do in today's webinar is say, right, how do people who want to use AI blend that AI technology with a human approach? So where does the AI start and the human handoff happen, and what needs to be the strategy for that? And we talk a lot about tools and resources that people have got today around agentic AI and things like that. And I think it'd be good in this session maybe to be able to bust some of the myths that come around that. So I think we've got two really key people to help us disseminate that. But if there are any hot topics or hot burning questions that anybody that is watching that have got, please feel free to drop them into the chat and or the comments section of LinkedIn, and I'll be able to showcase it just like that, as if by magic, it pops up on the screen. So if you've got a burning question for Jimmy or Kane, or if you think that there is a really interesting point that you want to jump on as we go through the conversation today, we want to make this a bit of an interactive and dynamic webinar. So drop your comments into the chat underneath the event, and we'll ask. But first of all, I want to talk about Kane. What are some of the myths? And I want to kind of cut through the hype of AI and talk about the real life things that happen in AI. So what would you say are the most common myths that you hear about AI in contact centers, and what's I suppose the truth behind what AI is actually happening and doing right now?
Good question. There is no myths, Gary. It's all entirely factual, and everything you read about is entirely true. And so the whole world is AI first, and they're coming for us. No, I think that inevitably there is, I think, a lot of attention and hype, as you can expect. You know, we're well and truly going through that kind of like hype cycle, so to speak, and everything's having its moment. You know, from AI agents, generative AI has kind of been through it generally, and I think now we're kind of in the agentic AI sort of hype cycle. And what it's kind of doing from our kind of vantage point is it's kind of starting to set. Actually, this year's been a little bit better, to be totally honest, but at the back end of last year, it was very much that, you know, leadership view this thing as some kind of magic bullet whereby, you know, AI is going to solve all of our problems, and can't we just give it to AI? And a complete lack of understanding about what it actually takes to design a production grade, you know, responsible and reliable solution. There's also this kind of like perception of, as great as large language models are, there's almost this kind of like everything's LLM driven. And so LLMs are going to do everything for us, and LLMs are the kind of the be all and end all. Whereas if you look at any organization that's ever existed, ever, that's done anything successful, it's never relied on one technology, and that's all. You know, you look at Uber or Netflix or whatever, and it's the orchestration of multiple technologies, each of which does very specific jobs, that makes it really, really great. And so when it comes to generative AI, where we're finding it having actually the best impact is if you were to view your whole kind of customer experience landscape as a series of kind of skills that you need, and each of those skills can be created almost in isolation, then the assembly of those skills gives you the rise to capabilities that you need to deliver outcomes with. So a good example of that would be, for example, maybe one skill that you need in a call center setting is to classify the nature of somebody's call. Right? That could be one capability. Maybe you could use large language models for that. Maybe you could use a machine learning model for that. Maybe you could use a combination of the two. But the reality is you can build a capability that can classify somebody's utterance and match that to something that your business can do to help them. Another example might be extracting important information from that utterance, like an entity, so a date or a time or an email or a name or something like that. And again, you could use large language models to do that, or you could use machine learning to do that. Authenticating someone is who they say they are. You probably don't really need generative AI for that. There's quite a few decent methods of authentication that don't rely on generative AI. And so you can see the picture starting to kind of assemble, whereby if you treat this as you require a series of skills, and generative AI gives you some enabling capabilities to be able to build those skills effectively, then you can assemble those skills in a robust kind of manner to deliver against the outcomes. And so thankfully this year, I think we're starting to see that some of the agentic AI hype is beginning to be kind of like challenged a little bit. I think companies are coming down to earth a bit more in terms of what it takes to deliver this kind of stuff. Salesforce's recent, Salesforce Agentforce V2 now has, deterministic workflow support, as if it didn't in the first place.
Now that they know the probabilistic one doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like they're rubbing up against all of these things that lots of other companies have figured out 5 years ago. You can now do entity extraction with Agentforce V2. It's like brilliant. Or what could we do with it before? So it's like finally the world is I think beginning to understand that there is a place for generative AI, a very important and powerful place for it, but it's not the absolute be all and end all that it perhaps was built up to be at the back end of last year.
And I think what I'm hearing from you there, and I think it's a really interesting point to make, is to say, if you analyze what your customer journey is and then analyze all of the different touch points in your journey, you can actually then think about where generative AI, large language models, and all of the stuff that we do in terms of workflow automation could actually assist versus where is it appropriate to assist in that. And I think IDMV is a really interesting one. Jimmy, from your perspective, and just jumping on some of the stuff that Kane said there, are you seeing differences, or are you seeing a more of a simplistic view of how people are approaching AI? What's your take?
Yeah, so just going on to what Kane said, it's really interesting. So I'll use the point of Salesforce, but it's not just Salesforce, it's everybody who launched into this kind of hype cycle of I could just throw anything at an LLM and it's going to solve like all of my problems. This is exactly like digital transformation programs back in the day. It's like the magic bit of tin that's going to solve all our problems. All I need is a CRM, or all I need is Pega, or all I need like it's just one more bit of technology, and all of my things will be, everything will be solved.
Do you not have a magic AI button on your desk, like Jimmy?
I do, but it's the Emperor's New Clothes, and it just completely shits
All right.
But everyone's got to pretend that I'm wearing clothes. That's the magic AI button. So yeah, the shiny bit of tin, the magic AI button. But yeah, so everybody's starting to throw all of these problems at LLMs, and we very quickly uncovered that they were, first of all, they're not capable of doing them, but they're not trained to do that. Like the language models, they're not action models. They weren't trained to take action. They're trained to like give answers, not to say that I can't give answers, and all sorts of different things like that. And that caused like as we always see, like it caused a huge amount of interest, and then like a rowing back of that. I think one interesting thing, and where I do think Kane articulated it very, very succinctly, I'm now about to repeat it and do a much less good job at doing it. But because we've come through like a 12 to 15 years of software as a service, we see everything through a lens of software and web apps and things like that, and not skills, as Kane said. Now, we were talking last week, Garrett, about workforce management, and people see workforce management as a software, but it's not. It's a set of skills. It's capacity planning, forecasting. It's AHT analysis. It's then pushing that into a schedule and mapping it to a list of employees with shift patterns. It's then taking that and then it's pushing it into like a 12-week shift rota. It's a load of different skills. And what those skills used to be was humans. It would be a human that would get your data. It would be a human that would do your forecasting. It'd be a human to do your scheduling. And it's specific skill groups. And I actually think now, when I said you don't need WFMs anymore, it's because if you can get, well, you don't, and you don't need CRMs. But if you go back and go, it's a skill, and what are each of the individual skills that match to each of the functions, and how does AI play a part in those skills? It's a much easier way of looking at the task, and it's a much quicker way to get to value.
And if we thinking about those skills, then, so if we think about people that are watching this, they might be operational leaders, they're probably working in a contact center and a customer service environment. So from the skills that they've got in their human teams, what do you think are the skills that we need to think about that could be supported and or replaced by AI? And I'll ask you that first, Jimmy, as we've gone a little bit rogue on that question. So what do you think some of those skills are?
Well, like one of the things that I don't really understand, I've just used workforce management as a first one. I don't understand why we pay a gajillion pounds for workforce management software, and then we still need a capacity planner to go in and put in all of the data into the workforce planning solution, which is supposed to give it for us. So that is a hat on a hat for me. Like, we don't need both of those skills, and that is a skill that an AI could almost certainly, well, either an AI or better API integrations or an ML would be able to solve today, and to remove that type of workload. In a lot of back office functions, like if I still know people today when most call centers today, if you have absence or sickness during a day, it's your scheduling team or your real-time team go in and start moving things around within the plans to try and make sure that we've got enough coverage throughout the day. Why should a task which is effectively, I'm sick, look at the skills that employee A is sick, look at the skills that are impacted and go and move some things around. At the moment, that's a human doing it. Why is a human doing that? And I think if you look at each one of these like individual like touch points, obviously I'm looking at it from an operational point of view. He might look at it from a customer point of view. If I'm looking at it from all of these different individual touch points, I think I can then start to go, how much time am I spending on on suboptimal tasks, which I'm paying like an expensive human being just to transfer data or to move some stuff around in a software which is already really expensive. And so those are a couple of areas that I see. And then just one more, I think from a coaching point of view, so much time is spent preparing for coaching, like by a team leader. So going into Excel, MI, going into Power BI, going into your survey platform to extract NPS or CSAT data, trying to pull it together. And really, you want your team leader to be coaching, not to be a spoke to the
foraging for information. Yeah,
exactly. You want them to have really great coaching conversations. And actually, we did a time emotion study. They spend 60 to 70% of the time gathering data, and it's those things that I think, looking at those bits where AI and automation can really play a part, will unlock a lot of value.
And I think there's an interesting comment from Sandit there, Kane, that I think you're probably going to come on to. So I'll let you carry on from Jimmy there, and maybe consider this as part of the question. But what's your thoughts on what Jimmy said there?
Well, it's really interesting because I'm not coming at it, as you said, from that sort of like back end operations perspective, and I'm almost a little bit flabbergasted that stuff is still going on. Like, people manually scheduling stuff, that seems to be such a basic solution, like it's such a basic problem. You know, if you look at like delivery companies that schedule deliveries and plan routes, and one person's not available and so they reschedule it, there's like that kind of stuff has existed for a long time. I'm kind of amazed that isn't a solved problem yet. But like, the way to go back to the question, which is like the skills thing, I kind of view it from, as you sort of alluded to, Jimmy, the front end perspective. So you're describing a lot there, like the behind the scenes stuff that needs to happen, and I think you've identified a good bit of waste in that back end stuff, which is the stuff that's going to prevent the delivery of value. But then if you go from the back end to like the backstage, which is like the technology and the stuff that goes on and required to make the end user service happen, and then the front stage, which is the actual experience that the user has, I think about it from that sort of like front stage perspective, which are like, what are the things that as a business you need to be able to do in order to serve customers? And some of that is a technology capability, and some of it is like a design pattern. And by what I mean by that is, for example, if you wanted a very simple use case would be answering questions. So customers have questions, they need answers, and there is degrees and scales at which the complexity of these answers are. But if from a very basic point of view, you've got a skill which is taking a question and producing an answer. That could be retrieval augmented generation. It could be an NLU that's kind of more hard coded. But there's a skill requirement there, which is answering questions. Maybe then there's a personalized nature to that, or a contextual nature to that, which is the other skill is then how do you then add personalization into this situation, which might be retrieving information from a back-end system. So the third skill there is an ability to integrate with relevant systems. And again, that could be one solution that does that. It could be a large action model that does that. It could be a kind of middleware layer that does that, but you need something to talk to your systems and pull data out from it. Another skill might be, which maybe is more of a design pattern, might be you might want to qualify whether a user is worth handing over to an agent. I say that sounds a bit brutal, but the reality is that if someone has, let's say let's say, for example, you're a retailer, and in order to make a return, you actually have to speak to somebody. But there's going to be criteria that you need to meet in order for you to be eligible to make a return. What you don't want to do is put everyone through to all the agents. You want to say, well, when did you purchase this item? Well, it was actually longer than 90 days ago, so I'm sorry, you're not eligible for a return. Therefore, there's no point in handing you over. So that kind of like design pattern of qualifying whether someone's worth kind of putting through to someone is another example of a kind of skill. And so we've got a list of about 50 of these things. And again, they're not all AI specific. Some of them are design patterns, some of them are AI related, some of them are not. But it's all of the key skills that you would need in order to be able to sort of deliver. And I think that going back to the original question is that everyone thinks that everything's AI related or everything needs AI. And a lot of these would probably benefit from AI. But then you've got the orchestration of all of this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, it's not as simple as just give everything to a large language model.
You said a really interesting word there, Kane. And I think that's where some contact center operational folk struggle, perhaps, is in that orchestration of the journey, because they haven't necessarily got the journey entirely mapped out in a really slick way and understand it in a really slick way, they can't quite naturally apply AI intervals or AI points into the journey to really kind of help it, because it's so fractured that it requires loads of people in that hamster wheel doing manual processes to fix it. So when we start to think about how contact centers can approach AI and approach the strategy, and we're going hugely off the script now, but when we think about how we help people build that orchestration and things that they need to have in place as fundamentals before they even start to approach AI, what would some of your advice be to kind of help build out that kind of orchestra?
Yeah. So well, you need to know what it is that you're trying to accomplish, don't you? And so the place where we would start is to do some analysis of what it is that you need to do. And by that I mean typically for us it's around sort of like customer needs. So what are the customer needs that you have? And we do that through a bunch of topic modeling where you can ingest, content from all your different channels, calls, emails, all that kind of stuff, and you essentially map out like what is it that people actually need from you, to then start together. We call it like a map of your world, basically. Like, what are all of the intents, to use the kind of machine learning term? But what I mean by intent is intention, not the machine learning classification of something. What are your customer needs? And then how are you delivering against those now? What's the best possible place where those needs can be resolved now? And where do you have gaps? So, for example, let's say you have a list of 200 customer needs, ranging from, change my address, add someone onto my insurance policy, remove someone from my insurance policy, etc., etc., etc. You might have some journeys online already available that are really, really good. Self-service journeys, they're available in the app or they're available on the website or whatever. You might have some that are like really high touch kind of things, and you really want those to go to a certain group of people that you have, a certain group of agents. You might have some whereby, you could gather a lot of information beforehand, but ultimately the decision needs to be made by a human. So it's about sort of like quantifying your landscape and your current offering of the best way to do things. And then the starting point is to say, well, how can we use a technology solution that essentially gets people into the right channel? And I know, Andrew Moorhouse is tuning in. He's really kind of big proponent of this, which I love, which is that whole kind of intent level triage. I think the HSBC have done this very successfully in the past, and a bunch of other companies, whereby the first port of call for your AI solution is to be the front door, the first port of call for all customer interactions across channels, analyzing and understanding what that customer need is, marrying it against the landscape and map of your world to say, well, for this, Jimmy, you're really better off using the mobile app. I'm going to deep link you into the app for that.
Yep.
And for this, Gary, really what you need to do is speak to someone. So I'm going to put you through to the right agent for that. And that's a really easy way of kind of managing demand and getting up and running. And then the next step is, how do you then go one further than that to start putting in place the orchestration capabilities that you need to automate some of those things from end to end, if you've either got gaps or if some of the self-service options you've got are ineffective? And for that, you kind of go through the same thing that you would typically do if it wasn't an AI project, which is, let's map out the process from front to back. What happens? What are the customer steps involved? What are the back office steps involved? What are the systems involved? What are the data requirements? What are the constraints and dependencies that we have, and all of that kind of thing? And then you would do what you would typically do again, which is you'd map out the areas of waste. And Jimmy's alluded to some of that already. Where's the waste? Where's the bottlenecks? What's the stuff that's preventing value from being delivered? Where are the kind of like pain points in the experience? And then how can we redesign that in a way that is really streamlined and all that kind of stuff? And then from there, you'll define your requirements. And typically your requirements are going to be, you're going to have to understand the customer need, right? So you're going to need an AI layer to understand what that need is. And you're going to need to then, depending on how mature you are, but over time, you're going to start probably with like more question answer stuff. Then you're going to gravitate towards data retrieval. Then you're going to gravitate towards data writing and retrieval, which is more transactional automation. You might gravitate into kind of like gathering information, authenticating someone, then handing over. And you kind of graduate from there. So where you will end up is you will require some orchestration platform that allows you to bring in the models that you need to do and enact these skills that I've been referring to, and to make the integrations that you need to make and all that kind of stuff. And there's lots of platforms out there that can do this. You can do it yourself through, various open source tools and stuff like that. My recommendation would be actually to use an enterprise grade AI orchestration platform. But yeah, and a lot of this won't be sort of like necessarily new stuff to people, because you should be doing things like journey mapping and all that kind of stuff anyway, process mapping and all that lot. It's just that now you've got a new opportunity in your solution space, which leverages AI.
Absolutely. And I think from a lean processing point of view, contact centers are good at lean, they're good at finding value, they're good at finding failure. They're not as good at joining up the dots to say, right, what's a technology solution for that, or what's an AI solution for that? Jimmy, I'm going to bring you into that because I think there's some really interesting stuff, and I'm going to bring on Laura's point here, which I'd like you to comment on around classification, because I know there's some really interesting stuff that you're doing within your kit that helps kind of get that understanding, that insight. But what's your views on what Kane said there about orchestration and journey mapping, and how we go about that in the contact center from an operational perspective?
Yeah, I love it. And look, I think it all ties in together. I'm going to see if I can sort of pull it into a thread.
Into a thread.
Yeah, which is not usually my strong point. But yeah, so I've already lost my thread. No, so what's really interesting is the journey that Kane you were just talking about, and the stuff around that Andrew Morehouse talks about in terms of like being right at the front of the queue. I think it's absolutely spot on. But where a lot of even enterprise grade agentic platforms struggle at the moment is at the base, which is data capture. So because the orchestration is so complex at the back end, where you've got CRMs, CCaaS platforms, desktop, FAQ, SharePoint,
ticket management,
yeah, all that type of stuff. It's how do you get into the workflow and into a place where you can start to orchestrate. So first thing for us is how can you get into the orchestration workflow as quickly as possible? Like and that for us is we've solved for it in terms of we've got the tool. Now for us, it's like, well, how quickly can an end user, like an enterprise AI orchestration platform, sign up to Mojo and get it onto the workflows of the desktops like as quickly as possible to capture. From the capture layer, we would then before we go to the top of the funnel and start triaging straight away, it's around, and this probably something we'll speak about later, is around how do we get your agents to train the AI? So how do we assist the agents initially? But what effectively is happening is your agents are also feeding back to the large language model and fine tuning. So outwardly, everybody's doing this, but I'm just gonna sort of show you like how the sausage gets made. Like everybody who's doing agent assist right now, it's not just agent assist; it's fine tuning the AI to become to continuously improve. Once you've got an AI that is then doing prompts and then doing the language prompts, the scripts that's really comfortable with, like a faster, better chatbot, it's then about giving it the tools. So either through like computer use or toolkits or MCP to actually go and do things. So what that is then is customer asks a question, agent has a response, and AI goes and does something. So that can be filling in Salesforce automatically, or it can be opening a window of a platform for an FAQs and then consuming that data in, or it could be sending off a letter, things like that. So then we're moving towards like more agentic kind of combination between LLMs and RPA to absolutely blow everybody's minds with acronyms. Yeah. And then once you get to that point, that's where the answers bit for Kane comes in. So each answer or each question is then being scored against a list of metrics. And what we're effectively saying is the AI, human assisted or otherwise, is the AI doing a really good job of answering this question? So if your human agent is 99% adherent to what the AI is saying and we're getting great outcomes, well, then it's almost tick. We're ready to go front of funnel for that particular task. And then brilliant. From there, you've then got an AI that can go right to the front of the funnel before it even hits the CCaaS. It hits your AI, and it goes. All the answers have been captured. All of the intents that Laura has said, and we've scored each intent and each sub intent and each journey. And when a customer starts going down a journey which is highly likely that we can that we can do via the AI, it tries to do it itself. If not, it then passes it over to the agent assist and does that automatically. And I think that is the kind of the full journey. I don't think we're quite there yet. You've got some people who go in front of funnel in voice, sort of voice AI IVR. You've got a load of agent assist people. You've got a load of chatbot people. But actually, we personally think the combination is quickly capture the data and get into the orchestration workflow, and then everything else just kind of cascades from there.
And I'm going to. Oh, sorry. I'll let you go on that point and then just move on to another one. Finish that point.
What I'll just very quickly say on that is that that's one way of doing it, although there is an alternative, which is to begin at the front end through, because these platforms will integrate with all of those solutions that you just mentioned. So if you were to go through and map out the journey, understand the integration requirements, it's been feasible for a long time actually to automate these things from end to end. It's just that now with large language models, things are a bit more fluid. But arguably, that's an alternative way of doing it. Is you actually begin with the front end automation, automate the process from end to end, and then what you can do is offer that to the agent on the back end. So it's almost the inverse, which is begin with the front end automation, soak up the demand and improve the self-service, and then give those same tools to the agent so that they can use the same thing, if something does get kind of escalated.
And I think Laura's summarized some stuff well there, is to say all of the stuff that we're talking about here is great, but we've got to make sure that the basics are in place first before we're even able to automate some of this stuff. And I'm conscious we've used a lot of phrases here, and we've used a lot of acronyms that are probably familiar to us. I mean, some of them I'm even like, what? So I just wanted to kind of zone in and kind of just understand that AI spectrum from you, Kane, before I jump onto my next question around where automation ends and human expertise should begin, to get your input on that. But before we move on to that question, for those that aren't familiar with some of the terms that we've used, so we've used RPA, we've used AI, which I hope most people are familiar with. We've used machine learning, we've used agentic, we've used LLM. We've not even talked about small language models yet, which we might come on to. But just kind of for the person watching this that might not be as clued up as us, what on earth do all of those things mean, and why is it important?
Fair enough. So, good question. Big existential question. So artificial intelligence is essentially concerned with the replication of human cognitive function fundamentally. And so the goal there is to have computer systems do things that typically a human brain would do. Underneath that, you've got machine learning is a component of artificial intelligence, and actually is the process of creating an artificially intelligent system. Very rarely do you ever want a machine learning. The machine has to learn in order for it to operate not autonomously, but on its own, in order to then simulate that intelligence. Underneath machine learning, the kind of technology of concern that we're talking about here is deep learning, which is a method of machine learning that uses a model of our brain. So the neural pathways that exist in our brain, lots and lots of millions and billions of nodes connected together amongst a bunch of different layers. That is the stuff that's given rise to generative AI, which is a subcomponent of deep learning, and a subcomponent of generative AI is essentially a computer system that can generate and create new content based on data that it's been trained on. And then underneath generative AI, you've got large language models, which are essentially a generative AI system that can understand and generate language, and now actually images and all kinds of other things.
As we've seen with everybody's action girl doll that we've seen on LinkedIn recently.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's fundamentally what it is. And the reason why it's important is because a couple of things. One is that typically the human computer interaction paradigm has been one of the human having to learn how to use the computer, We have to learn what a keyboard looks like and how to spell. We have to learn what a mouse is or a trackpad is and how to use that. And all the while, mobile phones, touchscreens, swiping, tapping, we've had to bend over backwards to put things into a language that the computer can understand to get us in order to do things. And the software paradigm of computers is that it is a kind of command-driven interface, which is I've got to tell you the steps that I want to go through to accomplish a result. And the big difference with AI is that for once, finally, the computer is the one doing the hard work to understand our language, which makes the human-computer interaction paradigm a lot more natural and frictionless. And rather than command-based, which is I've got to click here, click there, and click there, it's outcome-based, which is I've just got to describe to you what I want, like I want to add my grandma to my insurance policy. Now you go and figure out how to do it. And so those are the two big reasons why this technology is so powerful.
I'm sorry. I just want to.
You know what? It's so it's hard work wrangling you two. Jimmy, go on. I'll let you build on that.
There's two other bits though, because we mentioned like computer use and tool use though, because I think those are just the final like bit of the punctuation points at the end. Is that with tool use, as far as we'd come, we still had to kind of program the tools to go, AI, these are some tools that you can use. And those tools could have even been so basic as we've seen that large language models are rubbish at maths. So use a calculator in this way, use this in this way. So that's what's happens with tool use, and computer use is the same. Like go and see the vision of the screen and go and click on this button, click on this button. And then we used MCP, which is Model Context Protocol, which is the extension of the sort of the large language model kind of what would you call it, paradigm, which is we now no longer have to really define what the tools are. It goes and learns how to go and do the thing. So it does not just respond to a thing, but do the thing as well.
I mean, I'm just blown away by the phrase human-computer interaction paradigm. That's like just blowing my mind. I was going to say it's the start of a film with Julia Roberts, I'm sure of it. But just before we move on to the question around where automation ends and human expertise begins, Kane, and it might feed in naturally into that question, but do we genuinely want to be using agentic AI in the contact center, do you think?
It largely depends on how you define agentic AI. I've got a bit of a problem with the general term and how it's applied because most of it's not really agentic. But if you were to take the concept of a application that is able to understand the need of a customer and ultimately resolve an issue for a customer, be that answering a question or fulfilling some kind of process, then why not? Really, it's like. At the moment, if you show me a contact center that answers every single one of its phone calls and has a really great average handle time and super high kind of customer satisfaction and super elated, happy agents that don't have any attrition or anything like that, you show me a contact center that looks like that, and I'll be amazed. So the reality is that you need some technology for a number of things. One is to deal with the problems that you've got right now, which is you're probably not answering all your phone calls. You probably don't have great service across all of your use cases. You've probably got some problems with some agents. And also, inherently, because largely contact centers are relying on people fundamentally, and you can say the same thing for BPOs, you've got a huge scalability problem because you can't just double the amount of customers that you've got next year without essentially doubling the amount of people that you've got to support them. So if you were to think about it from that way, and there's a number of ways that you can do it. Some companies are saying, right, we want to automate everything that we possibly can and give stuff through our agents that the AI can't handle. Some are approach it from the perspective of saying, well, how do we identify the low value stuff, the easy stuff that's taking up, a lot of repetitive, boring sort of like effort and automate that stuff. Some approach it from the point of view of like, let's just only focus on failure demand, or let's just only focus on non-revenue producing calls and put all the revenue producing ones like hotel bookings and stuff like that through to the agents. So it all depends on your scenario and where you are and what you're trying to get to. But the reality is that the technology exists now, I would say, to probably do a very good job of automating pretty much next to all of your tier one issues, not in its entirety, because every service will have fallout and it'll have to have escalations for now. I think that'll change in the next few years. There's a really great paper from BPO that kind of makes some predictions around what the future of the contact center looks like in terms of like team size and focus and stuff like that, and it essentially forecasts the removal of tier one entirely. So I don't think that's necessarily not feasible. And I suppose the question there is, well, you know, is the goal and the intention to remove people? And the reality is that it's not really. Like, probably, if it wasn't for employment law, there's probably a good bunch of people who you'd probably prefer not to have because they're probably not performing very well and they're a nightmare to manage. They probably don't want to be there anyway because they don't enjoy the job and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, there's probably some brilliant people who are really, really kind of like carrying the ship, so to speak. And if you were to give them the ability to kind of supercharge their productivity, you'll find that you have even better performing agents and even higher CSAT, even higher retention and all that kind of stuff. So for me, AI is all about fundamentally improving the satisfaction of the user, the end user, through either giving them something that they need up front without them having to wait or all that kind of stuff, or improving the productivity of the agent, which enhances the solution for the customer in order to enable a business to grow rather than contract.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting point that you make around tier one and tier two, because the challenge that we've got there in the contact center is that the tier one stuff is the easy stuff to do, which gives me a bit of a break from doing the complex stuff.
Yeah.
Where we automate and we AI the tier one stuff, we're left with that cognitive overload potentially of agents. And I'm going to bring you in here, Jimmy, because I know you've talked quite a lot about the cognitive strain on an agent in the past and cognitive overwhelm. If we're doing all that stuff with tier one and we're left with tier two complex stuff, what's your view in what contact center leaders have to do to support their teams with that tier two stuff and that cognitive overload?
So I think it's really interesting. Like, I don't know if I totally agree on the tier two stuff either. Like, what? So the reason being, let me just answer your point straightforwardly, and then I'll refute my own point. But yeah, so I think that what will happen is there will be a shrinking of the agent base. To Kane's point, this is not about, and it's not about the contact center. It's about the end user. It's about customers. It's what customers want. It's the consumer-driven behavior. I don't want to have to rush to make a life insurance like phone call at midday in between my lunch break. I actually want to do it at 9 o'clock at night, but at 9 o'clock at night, nobody's available.
Yeah.
And most of the time at weekends, people aren't available to do it. It doesn't suit my demand. And so we see like the tail starts wagging the dog, and that's it. That's the same for all of the contact center industry. The whole contact center industry is huge. It's like a multi hundreds and hundreds of billion, maybe £1 trillion industry globally, and it's all the tail wags the dog. Whereas if we don't adapt to it as contact center people, brands will. New brands that have full AI, like agents responding to your calls 24/7. Whenever you want to speak to them, round the clock, whenever at your leisure, you'll be able to respond to it. I think that's important. Then talking about the tier one, tier two things. So I think what will happen is there'll be a contraction in the base of tier one, but there'll be even greater demand and maybe even like increasing salaries and pricing for tier two products, because initially I think the value to speak to a super agent or a role model kind of human agent will become in very high demand, especially in like complex environments. And even complex environments now is even something as simple as Wizmo. Like, where is my order should be really simple, because
I'm glad you explained that, Wizmo, because not everybody gets that. Where is my order?
Where is my order, Wizmo? Right? But even Wizmo should be easy. But because you've got the contact center, the warehouse, you've got the delivery company, it becomes like a 5-way conversation to find out where my bloody every package is, and then it turns up it's in next door's garden. So about, I think there
in
is
somebody's blue bin.
somebody's blue bin. Like, why have they put my PlayStation in someone's blue bin? But anyway, so I do think there'll be like a contraction in the tier one, and then there'll be an increase in demand within tier two products, and there'll be an explosion of tier two roles because we thought we got rid of. It's exactly what's happened with the contact center industry here, when we thought we'd move everybody to my account and self-serve, but because of all the problems that caused, it caused more inbound calls into the call center, because now I don't have my password, or I don't have X, Y, and Z. So there'll be an explosion of those roles. However, just to review a bit of this tier two bit as well, when it comes to like sort of like emotional calls and stuff like that, or like calls where there's more heightened state of stress, first of all, what we've uncovered is humans sometimes like to talk to robots and prefer it in certain types of situations. So unless we adapt to the changing face of consumer demand that's got to be driven by the AI, like a person will choose to go, I need to speak to the AI about, I don't know, a life insurance claim at this time of the night. And almost it's a bit of the uncanny valley, but likes not having to go through some of the emotional stuff, or maybe some of the stuff with another human being. We've seen it actually with coaching. I know I'm flipping to the back office stuff, but humans prefer an AI to tell them that the shit. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Please do not swear.
Sorry, right? So because it's less personal than if I go, you're rubbish at your handling time. So there's this lack of personal. The impersonal nature makes it easy for the message to go in rather than another human saying that you're rubbish. One last thing as well. One thing that we've uncovered, and this is through developing product. Actually, some of this really complex QA stuff, like sort of multi-tiered processes and complex coordination stuff, what we've uncovered is actually we think that is done better by an AI as well. So where there's multiple things that you need to spin, like, where is my order call? Where there's 5 different points of information, and you're trying to triangulate something at the same time you're trying to communicate to a customer around what's happening. When we're seeing that in using kind of Cursor and AI in the back end to develop our product, we're kind of testing how quick is it to fix like a complex bug from a customer or a range of customers going, this button or this event or this thing is not working in your SaaS product. Usually that would go to a frontline agent. They would triage it into back-end team. It would be scheduled. There'd be story points associated with it and all this type of stuff. With the AIs now, it'll just go into the code base, fix it, push it to the dev environment, goes to testing, goes to a skills-based functional QA tester, and AI that will test it. It'll go back and then it'll push it into live. I'm not saying,
and that's my view, that becomes a truly agentic process then, really, isn't it? It's actually fixing itself and improving itself, which I think is where we can use agentic AI to our improvement agenda, because continuous improvement, developers, etc., cost a lot of money. So if we can do stuff like that, I think it's awesome. Kane, I want to come to you for this particular question, because you said right at the start that one of your specialisms is tackling voice AI, and I think we've talked about where automation should start and end, and we've also, or we're also going to talk about how we avoid over automation. But I think one of the things, or one of the trend areas that I'm seeing, that you're probably seeing at the same time, is people thinking about how we integrate. And to Jimmy's point earlier, people like talking to an AI, whether that's widely adopted or not, I don't know yet. But Sandeep's question here is, where are there ways that we can utilize technology, AI, to mimic human behavior, to make the interaction as human as possible? My thoughts on this is it's taken us to the voice AI space. What's your view to Sandeep's question here?
The question in response is that why do you need it to be as human as possible? We have a framework which is a personality design framework. So if you're going to create something that has a customer facing role, like a voice AI agent or chat or what have you, essentially you don't really have a choice, because the voice that you use, the tone that it adopts, the language that you use, all shapes a perception in somebody's mind about the kind of thing that this is, the kind of person that it is. And so you have to consciously design the personality for this thing. And over doing this for many, many years now, right from the days of Alexa and rule-based chatbots all the way through to today, what's very apparent is that most organizations don't necessarily want something to be ultra human and personable, because you've got that kind of uncanny valley risk there. And the question that you have is, like, the voices now are fantastic. 11 Labs, I don't know if you've seen Sesame, that released its conversational management model earlier on this month or last month, which is the ability to essentially understand your intonation and mirror that back. So Gary, if you sound really super sad, I will display a similar type of tone in the voice response to make sure that it's clear that I understand your level of conversation. And so you can potentially create very human-like conversations, and a conversation in itself is essentially, I suppose, in a way, an skeuomorph. Basically, we're not actually creating conversations. Yeah, we're not actually creating conversations. We're using the hallmarks of conversation to make the interaction with a computer system easier to use, basically. So I think you've got to be a bit careful about trying to go ultra human like, because for example, even the AI Act, the European AI Act, mandates that you've got to say that you're talking to an AI assistant. And so there's various things that you can do to make it more human like. You can use a very good voice, you can use something like Sesame to mirror back the tone. You can use effective conversation design best practice to make the conversation flow and feel like a natural kind of conversation. You can use things like contextual responses with large language models. So if you're kind of having a conversation about rescheduling an appointment and you say something like, I can't make the appointment on Saturday because I've got to take my grandma to the hospital, a contextual response that comes back to you that says, okay, fine, if you've got to take your grandma to the hospital, that's no problem, we can reschedule. That response will be impossible in a rule-based NLU world, but what it shows to the user is that you understand them deeply enough to be able to reflect back what they've said. So there's loads of little tricks that you can use to create more natural like conversations. We just have to be mindful and careful about how convincingly human we want them to be.
And I flagged up Ian's comment here because he talks very much about the empathetic role of AI and where emotional intelligence of a human kicks in. And I think what we're trying to do sometimes is to make the voice AI or the AI as human as possible, so that people feel like they're talking to a human. But I think my premise there sometimes is you're starting a relationship off on deception, in that you're basically trying to be something that you're not, and then when someone catches you out, you then think, oh, actually you weren't human, I'm not doing those things. So actually, from a relationship point of view, we need to be really clear up front, specifically with regulation coming down the line, that that's an important part. Jimmy, do you have I can see you have do you have a view on that? What's your point?
Yeah, my point is, first first principles, are your humans empathetic, and are they able to understand context? That's what I always go to, like my first starting block, because everybody goes, oh well, the AI is not empathetic and it can't understand context. Well, I've had plenty of interactions with humans on the phone, some of which over the last week, which didn't understand where I was coming from and didn't understand the context, and was computer says no and things like that. So I think a benchmark actually is a balance between, first of all, doing the analysis on your human base and understanding, like, what is your baseline empathy or baseline confusion or baseline context and stuff like that, and understanding what is the baseline. I think then I would kind of agree with you guys. We don't want to get into like AIs which are too human-like, but I think just something a notch better than what your actual humans are creating is like good enough for the most part, I believe. And then just moving on from that, we've seen some really great technology like over the last week. We were in we're in the expo in Las Vegas last week, and we got to speak to some great companies, great automatic speech recognition companies, some really great like auto QA, auto coaching,
accent softening.
no, so that's what I was going to say. So accent softening software. So we spoke to
Not sure how we feel about that yet, but
the tomato AI, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tomato AI,
yeah.
So we spoke to
brilliant.
Tomato. It's tomato AI.
Tomato, yeah.
Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Let's call the whole thing off. But just those accent softening software, and that's where that's where I personally, I don't really know where I stand with this now, because I'm like, there's some stuff which I don't think humans are naturally empathetic. Like we say we are, but like a lot of people aren't, and in call centers in particular, it's people are having robotic conversations. It's just a human that's doing it. So I think just the AI just being better than that, but not too like overly familiar, I think is a good starting point. With all of the other tools and software and stuff around combining the hybrid of humans and AI, I'm a little bit unsure on, and I don't know what good looks like or great looks like yet. I'm still kind of trying to find my position.
And
ultimately, yeah,
go on,
great. Yeah, great. Just looks like a customer getting a result that they need in as little time with as little effort as possible. And arguably, it doesn't necessarily matter how human-like it is or how empathetic it is, as long as the user gets the outcome that they need. And it's if you look at all of the data that I've seen in the last 5 years points towards customers value convenience over brand, and they value speed over anything else. So if you just focus on convenience and speed, you'll be 90% of the way there. The empathy and the human-like stuff is just going to kind of like put the icing on the cake, but it's not going to help you get massive gains. Your massive gains are going to come from good design, good process orchestration, and reliable solutions.
Yeah. And you know what, the kind of the key areas I'm seeing at the moment, I think we're still we debate AI to a really great degree, and we talk about people orchestration, we talk about journey orchestration, but the typical bits that I'm seeing AI just being used for is kind of the fundamental stuff is, can I auto summarize my calls, can I auto QA, and can you help me find the right calls for my agents to for my managers to coach from? Those are the three basic principles that I'm seeing. Where does the advancement come from that? How do we help people move from doing the basics to doing something that's a bit more groundbreaking? Kane, what's your view on
that? So a number of things. So I don't think it's groundbreaking because we've been doing it for the last 7.5 years. But if you were to use these technologies in a way that facilitates a conversation with a customer that enables that customer to get an outcome from it, booking an appointment, changing an address, rescheduling whatever it might be, adding someone, removing something, closing the bank account, all of those transaction-based stuff. The value of this technology is in making, because in the rule-based automation world, you could still do that stuff, and many companies have been doing it really successfully for a long time. It's just that they reach a ceiling, and the ceiling looks like in some cases 40% of conversations would be successfully automated and 60% would escalate to an agent. What this technology does firstly is it allows you to get more mileage out of those solutions, because you can create better conversations, you can understand customers a lot better, and you can create greater experiences. Now, for me, that's not transformational, but for many organizations, that is transformational, because you're essentially holding or hosting or facilitating tens of thousands, if not millions, of automated conversations, one-to-many at scale, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And that really is where the immediate value is. And then you can advance on that, of course. You can say, well, we've gone from a deterministic process and we're using generative AI to enhance our understanding to improve completion rates, and that's great. You could take the next kind of level from that, is to say, well, we're going to use something that's a little bit more agentic in nature, which is we're going to give this thing a goal, which is whenever someone enters into this process, it's all about changing address. And to change address, you're going to need access to these 3 tools, and use this tool then, and that tool then, and this tool then. And then the AI is going to orchestrate that dialogue in order to understand what tools to use when and get the customer through it. And you'll find that that's probably a more fluid interaction. You could probably consider that to be a little bit more transformational, if you like. And that should, in theory, improve completion rates. And then the stage beyond that is that you have an orchestrator that sits on top of all of that. So the moving house agent and the new policy agent and the adder policy and all these other processes are all sub agents that have access to all of their tools. And you've got this orchestrator over the top that essentially then decides which processes to invoke when based on the customer utterance. And the whole thing becomes, in Sandeep's kind of terms, to be a lot more human-like and more natural. Now, all of that is entirely possible today. I would argue that, as I said before, that tier one stuff, it's entirely feasible, I think, for the vast majority of tier one conversations to be entirely automated by AI across multiple channels, depending on authentication requirements. So maybe that could be considered transformational, because if you imagine any contact center that takes away all tier one tomorrow, it's not just now all of a sudden you're not handling tier one. You've now got to reorchestrate your people, because they're now going to be doing different stuff. They're going to be managing the AI systems, continuously improving the AI systems, dealing with a lot more complexity, as we already discussed. Your KPIs are going to have to change. Your average things like average handle time are a completely pointless metric and stuff like that.
It's definitely transformational, Kane. And I think a lot of contact centers are doing the basics. I think when you start to talk about all of the things we've done today around thinking about the needs of your customers, thinking about the purpose of your AI strategy, thinking about the journeys that you're going through and how you want to orchestrate those and separate those skills out, I think that's a transformational task for a lot of contact centers. We've got literally about 30 seconds to go. So, Jimmy, I'm going to ask for a 15 seconds.
Yeah,
that's what you've got.
15 seconds in there. Yeah, I just think the final bit that we've not spoken about just there is, I think that's the real value driver is on customer concierge, where the customer has their own AI, and actually the contact center agents, our humans, are actually interfacing with an AI, not the other way around. And I think that may be because of consumer demand, be more ahead of us than what we actually realize.
Yeah. I think that's on a par with human computerized interaction paradigms. Kane, I'm going to give you a 15-second slot just to give us your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are essentially, if you are running a contact center or work within a contact center, you've got to view this as the biggest opportunity that you've ever come across in your life. It is absolutely not a threat whatsoever. For those that embrace it and take on the challenge, you'll find that the agents will be far more productive, customers will be far happier, and the business will be at scale far more effectively.
And I think we've got a front end and a back end kind of panel here. So if people are looking for solutions to kind of help automate and AI their business, please do get in touch with Kane. If you're looking to drive a more fundamental shift in people capability and team leader and operational efficiency, get in touch with Jimmy or speak to me. But either or, I think that's been a really great conversation. And thank you very much to Kane and for Jimmy for joining. And thanks to everybody who's contributed there. There's been some really interesting points made in the chat. If you are watching this in replay, feel free to carry on the conversation, and we'll fire some questions to the panel in the LinkedIn sphere. And if you are watching in replay, hello. But for those that are watching live, thank you very much from me for tuning in. Thanks very much to Kane and to Jimmy for joining. I'll ask Kane and Jimmy just down for 30 seconds more. But for everybody else, I'm going to end the stream here and say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your weeks. Take care, folks.
Pleasure. Nice one.